Good afternoon. The National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. And question 1, Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on what the Welsh Government is doing to tackle dementia?
Yes, Together for Mental Health sets out these steps being taken to further improve dementia services. Our focus is on improving rates of timely diagnosis, raising awareness and increasing access to information and support.
First Minister, over 45,000 people have dementia in Wales, and this lunchtime the Alzheimer's Society launched their Dementia 2014 Opportunity for Change report in Wales. The summary highlights the lack of a long-term national commitment on dementia, and they call for a specific dementia strategy with clear lines of accountability. What guarantees can you provide to those patients and their families who live with dementia that the Welsh Government is willing to listen and act upon the recommendations that have been launched in the report today?
Well, Together for Mental Health provides that framework, and I know that there are many who are aware of that framework. The member will be aware, of course, of the dementia-friendly Communities and Dementia Friends campaign, which we have supported as a government. In January, for example, the Minister launched the Alzheimer's Society's Dementia Friends initiative, and that, of course, was funded by Welsh Government. I can also point, of course, to the Living Well with Dementia Information Pack, again funded by Welsh Government and developed and distributed by the Alzheimer's Society, which provides invaluable advice to those who are affected by dementia and by Alzheimer's, and those, of course, who care for them.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, mae dros 2,000 o bobl a dementia cynnar arnyn nhw, dementia cyn I bod nhw'n 60 oed, ac mae gwasanaethau yn benna ar hyn o bryd yn cael eu cyfeirio at wasanaethau henoed dementia. Sut allwch chi fel Llywodraeth arwen gwasanaeth sydd ar gael i'r bobl hynny, y grŵp yma, sydd dan 60 oed, 2,000 ohonyn nhw sydd ag anghenion gwahanol iawn arnyn nhw, yn enwedig os ydyn nhw ag anghenion preswyl yn ogystal?
Hynny'n iawn, wrth gwrs, a mae'n bwysig dros ben, a mae'r strategaeth yn nabod hwn bod na ofal ar gael iddyn nhw. Mae dementia, wrth gwrs, yn holl gwahanol mewn rhywun sydd o dan 60 oed, mae'n gyflymach yn y ffordd mae fe'n symud ymlaen. Ac wrth gwrs, ni'n erbyn i'r bwrdd iechyd I sicrhau pa maen nhw'n ystyried gofal I bobl â dementia, ystyried sefyllfa rhywun sydd dan 60 oed.
Question 2, Jenny Rathbone.
Diolch, Clywyd. What is the Welsh Government doing to combat the commercialisation and sexualisation of childhood?
Well, we're committed to protecting the rights of children across all portfolios, and of course ministers are under a duty to ensure they have due regard to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in developing policies and legislation that protect and safeguard children.
The evidence presented by Cardiff University in Ty Howell last week indicates that when boys and girls speak out, 10 to 12-year-olds are under huge pressure to turn a boy-girl friendship into a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. And this continues as more seriously as they get older in secondary school. Now, there is an opportunity to address this inappropriate relationships too early on before children are able to deal with sexual relationships in the Violence, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Bill. But at the moment, the aspect relating to the curriculum in schools has been left out of the bill. And I wondered what, therefore, the government is going to do to address this issue, because it isn't just this research all over the place. Teachers are talking about it.
Well, I understand the point fully that the member makes, but the bill is not the place for dealing with this issue. This needs to be dealt with as part of the curriculum, and of course, as part of the wider curriculum review and policy initiatives that are being delivered by the Department for Education and Skills at the moment. It's not a question of disagreeing with the member's points. She is correct in the points that she makes, but this is a matter we believe that is best dealt with via the curriculum and its review rather than by the legislation she refers to.
Mohammed Ashgar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. First Minister, do you agree with me that companies found to have breached official guidelines regarding the commercialization and sexualization of childhood should be banned from bidding for Welsh Government contracts in future?
Well, I'm not aware of any companies that have fallen into that category, but if the member has any evidence of that, we would of course be pleased to consider it.
We now move to questions from the party leaders. And first this afternoon, we have the leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, 1 in 200 pregnancies ends in stillbirth, a figure that hasn't changed for some 20 years. And indeed, the most recent figures available show that the rate in Wales is increasing. What progress has your government made in implementing the recommendations of the Health and Social Care Committee's inquiry into this heartbreaking tragedy?
Well, of course, the Minister will be able to respond more fully with regard to that, but the incidence of stillbirths in Wales has not changed greatly in recent years. Whether it's the case that there is a level beyond which it cannot go down, that's a matter, of course, for the medics to determine, but certainly we do have one of the lowest rates in terms of stillbirths in the world.
Minister, I would state quite clearly it is possible to drive down the number of stillbirths in Wales. We just need concerted action to do so. The government did establish the Welsh Initiative for Stillbirth Reduction, which was charged with implementing the committee's recommendations. That initiative came to an end earlier this year. Are you now confident that without that initiative, measures around reduced fetal movement and growth assessment programmes are being routinely implemented across all obstetric units in Wales?
Yes, I mean, we would expect that work to continue. The maternity network, of course, is in place. And the good work that has been put in place thus far, we would expect to see continued in the future.
One method that seems to have a significant impact on levels of stillbirth is to make Doppler scans a routine part of fetal anomaly scans. So St George's Hospital in London has made this standard practice to offer all first-time mothers the scan. It costs the NHS just £15 per scan, and they have seen their stillbirth rate drop by 50% in 3 years. Would you commit to looking at introducing similar scanning regimes here for all first-time mothers in Wales?
Well, based on the figures that the leader of the Liberal Democrats has provided, I think this is something that needs to be looked at, and certainly I will ask the Minister to examine the findings of that pilot project to see whether it can be applied in Wales.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the recent cuts in the skills budget of £7 million, along with other measures, have realised a cut of £10.7 million to the apprenticeship programme. These notices were given to the providers with only 4 days' notice of the contract starting on August the 1st. Why was this undertaken in such a shambolic way that has jeopardised 9,000 apprenticeship places here in Wales?
Well, we have, of course, more than 12,000 young people who have been helped through Jobs Growth Wales. He needs to await, of course, the draft budget announcement in terms of what the future funding for apprenticeships is. But certainly, we believe we have a very good record in Wales, particularly given the fact we've had to deal with cuts of at least £1.5 billion from his party.
As per usual, First Minister, you've sidestepped the direct question I put to you, because I note in the budget announcement today there is talk of additional money for apprenticeships for up to 5,000 places. This is in-year cuts that your government have made to the current programme, totalling £10.7 million, that has threatened 9,000 places, 9,000 apprenticeship places. Surely that reeks of shambles at the heart of the government in dealing with the finances. The providers were expecting the figures to be delivered by March so that they could plan for the new contracts in August. All I am merely asking is why, with only 4 days' notice, such devastation was wrought on the apprenticeship programme here in Wales. It is a fact. It is there. Those are the contracts the providers are dealing with. Why such a shambles?
Well, I mean, I have to say, he seems to ignore the fact that we were called on to make in-year cuts as well by the UK government, and therefore we can't magic. I know he thinks there's a magic money tree somewhere, but we cannot magic up money, and that means difficult decisions have to be taken. The reality is that our record when it comes to apprenticeships and providing young people with opportunities is much, much better than anything his party has ever come up with in any level of government anyway.
First Minister, 1.8 million apprenticeships have been generated by the UK government since 2010. What your government has done has made in-year cuts I am unaware of any substantial in-year cuts given to your government by the UK, and in fact you've had Barnett consequentials. What the providers and what the young people seeking those apprenticeships want are some straight answers. Why the chaos? 4 days' notice. I do take the point that apprenticeships have been successful here in Wales. 66%. I'm happy to acknowledge that. 66% of people who enter the apprenticeship programme find full-time employment at the end of that programme. 80% of people who go on the programme can finish their courses. There is a success story there. But sadly, your government have taken 10.7 million out of that budget in mid-year with 4 days' notice to the providers. What does that say about the priorities for your government? It says that the priorities are all wrong, does it?
Well, he is generous in his praise, and I accept that, but he can't say on the one hand we have done well, and on the other hand we're doing badly. The reality is the Jobs Growth Wales is a very good scheme. He acknowledges that. I won't comment further on that, but there have been difficult decisions we have had to make as part of the budget process. He mentions Barnett. Will he join me then, and indeed other parties in this chamber, in pursuing the need for dealing with the issue of underfunding in Wales? He keeps on saying, we call it belly aching at one point. The reality is, and I make this point very clearly, that we are underfunded to the tune of £300 million a year, give or take a little one way or the other. There are some who say, and his party has said it, we are holding at the begging bowl. I say to him that there are people who will listen to what he says, people whose parents and grandparents worked in coal, in steel, in slate, in tinplate, who contributed greatly to the prosperity of the UK. Is it really asking too much that they should have a fair share of the pot now? And I would hope that he would join me, and indeed, in fairness, other leaders in this chamber, in standing up for Wales.
And finally, Leader of Plaid Cymru, Liam Wood.
Diolch Llywyd. First Minister, over the summer, the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced generous tax breaks for companies who were interested in using fracking as a means of extracting shale gas. Now, there are varying estimates in terms of how much shale gas could be extracted in Wales, but the UK government seems intent on pressing ahead with the granting of licences for drilling. Does the Welsh Government share the UK Government's enthusiasm for fracking?
No, we've always taken the precautionary approach. Of course, the planning issues surrounding fracking are devolved, and that precautionary approach has not changed.
Among the many concerns raised by members of the public is the Department of Energy and Climate Change decision to press ahead with simplifying underground access for oil and gas developers, giving permission to companies to drill under private land and private property. 99% of respondents to a DEC consultation objected to that. Should fracking be permitted under private property without the consent of the owner?
I think there are real issues with that. I think it's very difficult to justify that to the public. If she's going to invite me in her third question to consider whether the licensing regime should be devolved, that is something I have some sympathy with.
Okay, that's good. Fracking remains controversial, as you're aware, and Plaid Cymru has suggested a moratorium on fracking operations until and unless safety and environmental concerns can be satisfied. Now, the issue highlights the wider problem that the country has little competence over its own natural resources, and I thank you for your previous answer on that point. We do, however, currently have powers and competence over planning. Would Welsh Ministers support Welsh local authorities who wish to implement a de facto moratorium using existing planning legislation?
I think a moratorium is difficult. I think it's challengeable, and also the fact if you impose a moratorium on fracking, there are other technologies that will be drawn into it as well. There are some who will argue, as I've heard, for a moratorium on onshore wind. Others who will argue for a complete moratorium in terms of open cast mining, and they all have their arguments. I understand that. I think what's important, and I don't think we're very far apart in this regard, that it should be that caution should be exercised when it comes to considering granting planning permission for fracking, and full consideration has to be given to the environmental impact as well as the social impact. That much is true. And so, again, I reiterate the point that I've heard what the UK government has said, but our approach in planning terms remains the same.
We now move to questions on the paper again. Question 3, Lindsay Whittle.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the impact to existing businesses and jobs in Newport of the Welsh Government's proposed black route for the M4 around the city, please?
Well, of course, subject, of course, to the necessary examinations that have to take place, such as environmental impacts, such as any potential public inquiry. Our view is that the black route would significantly improve access to Wales, particularly Newport. New junctions are included in the Llanllyn development area and direct to central Newport itself. It would greatly increase connectivity for existing businesses and the potential of employment sites across Newport. And of course, there are various stages of examination that the black route would have to go through.
First Minister, Associated British Ports have already warned that the proposed black route will severely damage the economy of Newport, leading to trade moving to Bristol and Liverpool. Another major Newport employer, Island Steel, has called for an alternative route involving developing the southern distributor route to please be examined. Will you now agree that a full public consultation and examination of the suggested blue route needs to take place and that the current plans for the black route should be put on hold whilst this is done?
Well, with regard to the black route, as I say, there are stages it must go through. With the blue route, I have to say to members, it is not what it appears to be. It will cost about 800 million, not 300. It will be delivered in the same time scale. I've travelled along the blue route. At the moment, it has traffic lights on it, effectively, and it would need a substantial amount of work. It also goes past a brand new housing estate. And one of the issues that will need to be looked at is whether residential houses would have to be removed and whether businesses would also have to be moved. So the blue route is not a pain-free option, if I can put it that way. It never was, nor can it be delivered in a time scale that would be faster than the black route. That said, I repeat what I said earlier on, and that is that there will need to be an environmental study, that much we understand. There may well be a public inquiry, and it's important that these stages take place in order for there to be full transparency with regard to the black route.
John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister agree that the M4 around Newport and local businesses and jobs would benefit greatly from a more integrated transport system, and Welsh Government's priority should be public transport, including a South Wales metro system?
Well, the metro system is moving forward anyway, and that is something that we will develop. We can't escape the fact that the traffic situation at the Brynglas Downs will get worse. It's not going to improve, and it simply isn't the case that the traffic will suddenly disappear from that tunnel. I don't think it's one or the other, if I'm honest with the member. I think it's perfectly possible to develop the metro proposals, as well as, of course, examining difficulties on the road network, as we did with the Llandyssil bypass, as we did with the Porthmadog bypass, as indeed was done with the straightening of parts of the A470. And a full examination will take place of the black route, as I've already mentioned, but that does not mean, of course, that it's a question of the development of the M4 having to take place instead of moving forward with the metro. The two will happen at the same time.
Andrew Archie Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I know the announcement on the budget is subject to various votes in this institution before it is confirmed, but part of the agreement seems to relate to an environmental assessment, another environmental assessment around the black route, as I understand it, for the M4 Relief Road. Will this work be undertaken if the budget deal is ratified, or must the environmental assessment wait as well till 2016, where I think you draw a line on the construction phase?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the budget ahead of what the Finance Minister may or may not say, but it's important to reiterate the point that the preferred route that has been announced by the Minister is, of course, and we know this, subject to various stages of consultation in order, of course, for it to be as transparent as possible.
Question 4, Aled Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar weithredu'r safonau'r Gymraeg?
Wnes i ddatganiad ysgrifenedig ar amserlen safonau'r Gymraeg ym mis Gorffennaf. Ni'n parhau i ddrafftio'r rheoliadau unol ar amserlen honno. Mater i Gomisiynydd y Gymraeg yw gweithredu'r safonau terfynol.
Gai ofyn i chi felly, Prif Weinidog, os di dal yn bwriad ganddoch chi i gwblhau y tair rhan cyn etholiadau'r cynulliad, ac ydych chi'n ail ystyried oedd y safonau drafft ym mis Ionawr yn sôn am y sefyllfa lle oedd cwmnïau sydd derbyn gwasanaethu sydd wedi cael eu contractio allan ddim yn cael safonu Cymraeg arnyn nhw. Erbyn hyn, mae'r treian o wasanaethau cyhoeddus yng Nghymru yn cael eu contractio allan, felly mae yna blwch enfawr yn y safonau, a gai ofyn i chi ail ystyried ar sail hynny.
Wel, mae'n rhaid i ddweud wrth gwrs bod yna ymgynghori wedi cymryd lle, neu mynd i gymryd lle ynglyn â'r reoliadau eu hunain, ac wrth gwrs bydd y reoliadau eu hunain o flaen cynulliad y mis Mawrth, felly bydd yna gyfle i ystyried ym mha ffordd allai y safonau cael ei gryfhau o ystyried y sefyllfa mae'r aelod wedi sôn am.
Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, byddwch yn ymwybodol o sylwadau'r FSB ynglyn y dylai Comisiynydd yr Iaith Gymraeg ceisio defnyddio'r safonau gymesur i sicrhau bod gorfodaeth yn berthnasol ac yn cyd-fynd ag anghenion busnesau bach yng Nghymru. Allwch chi ddweud wrthon ni a yw eich llywodraeth yn cefnogi sylwadau'r Federasiwn Busnesau Bach, ac os felly, a byddwch chi'n hyrwyddo yn eich ymateb i'r ymgynghoriad o roeddech chi'n sôn am yn gynharach?
Wel, wrth gwrs, ni'n mwyn sicrhau bod ni'n gwrando ar barn pob un a pob gorff sydd yn ymgysledig â hwn, a ni'n mwyn sicrhau bod y safonau sy'n cael cefnogaeth cryf ag eang dros Cymru'n gyfan gwbl, felly edrych mlaen i weld beth bynnag bydd sylwadau'r FSB.
Alan Fred Jones.
Diolch yn fawr. Ydych chi'n credu, Prif Weinidog, pan fydd y safonau yn cael eu cyflwyno i'r cynulliad 4 blynedd i mewn i dymor y llywodraeth yma, bod hynny'n dangos commitment a gallu cynllunio bwriadus effeithiol o safbwynt y Gymraeg?
Os mae'n beth sy'n bwysig yw bod ni'n sicrhau bod y reolau hyn yn rhai sydd yn cael ei gefnogi a hefyd reolau sydd yn ymarferol. A mae hwnna'n meddwl, wrth gwrs, bod rhaid cael y Comisiynydd yn rhan o'r broses, a hefyd, wrth gwrs, i ymgynghori mewn ffordd iawn, ac wrth gwrs, i ddod â'r reolau nôl o flaen y cynulliad. Mwyn cael pethau'n iawn, mae pethau'n gallu ala tam bach mwy amser.
Question 5, Gwyn Price.
Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on youth unemployment in Wales?
Yes, our priority, of course, is to ensure that young people have an opportunity to develop fully in life. To achieve this, we have provided key employability programmes. We've mentioned Jobs Growth Wales already, of course, and introduced the Youth Engagement and Progression Framework.
Thank you for that answer. Does the First Minister agree with me that the drop in youth unemployment in Wales is yet another example of the Welsh Government leading the way in the UK with programmes like Job Growth Wales, and that the UK and Scottish governments could do well to follow them? Yeah.
The member will not be surprised if I say yes, his answer. Again, I come back to the point that I made earlier on about the success of Jobs Growth Wales, the fact that we have seen a substantial drop in unemployment amongst young people in Wales, particularly those between 16 and 17 years old, where there's a substantial difference to the better between Wales and the rest of the UK. And that shows that Jobs Growth Wales, not on its own, but in working with the other schemes that we've put in place, is having a significant positive effect on the prospects of young people.
William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Though we welcome the improvements in youth unemployment being reduced, First Minister, you will know that approximately 20% of young people have been out of work for more than a year, and 10% of 16-year-olds are not in education, employment or training. Though we welcome the improvement, what will you now do to make sure this is a really effective programme which is so vital to the needs of Wales?
Well, if you look at the Youth Engagement and Progression Framework, which was published in October of last year, it introduced the Youth Guarantee for Wales. We also, of course, have been funding higher level apprenticeships together with Jobs Growth Wales, and of course we see success. One example of that, for example, is the fact that the figure for NEETs dropped by 2 percentage points between 2011 and 2012, and we want to see that figure drop further in the future.
Bethan Jenkins.
Prif Weinidog, am ystyried bod mwy na 1 mewn 5 person ifanc yn ddiwaith yng Nghymru, ac hefyd mae'n siŵr bod chi wedi gweld bod rhaglen eich llywodraeth wedi cael ei werthuso yn annibynnol gan Ipsos Mori i ddangos eich bod yn gwario 73% o'r gyllideb a'r swyddi sydd yn bodoli yn barod. Pam eich bod chi fel llywodraeth yn torri apprentisaethau, rhaglenni apprentisaethau fel hyn, pan dyn ni angen mwy o bethau fel hyn i ddigwydd o fewn Llywodraeth Cymru?
Wel, fel sy'n, mae rhaid sefyll I weld beth mae'r cyllideb I hunan yn gweud, ond ynglyn â Jobs Growth Wales fel cynllun, mae wedi cyfle I bobl, wrth gwrs, bobl ifanc, I cael swydd bydden nhw heb y sgiliau I gael, na beth sy'n bwysig I gofio hefyd. Falle bydden nhw wedi cael swydd, ond nid y swydd sydd gyda nhw achos y cynllun I hunan. A felly mae'r ystyried gwerth y sgiliau maen nhw wedi cael o achos y cynllun.
Elena Parrott.
George Lewis. First Minister, my main criticism of Jobs Growth Wales has been that it doesn't assist young people in long-term unemployment. And in fact, the scheme is not accessible to many of those young people due to double funding issues with UK government schemes. Similarly, the LIFT programme announced this year is not available in many parts of Wales, including Wales's worst NEET hotspot, Bridgend. What progress has the Welsh Government made in discussions with the UK Government over these double funding issues? And will you agree to review provision of support to those young people in places like Wrexham, Bridgend and the Vale of Glamorgan, where long-term youth unemployment is a real problem, but neither LIFT nor Jobs Growth Wales can assist?
I don't accept that Jobs Growth Wales doesn't help them. I mean, it's aimed at them in the first place. I have to remind the member, of course, that one of the first actions of her party in London was to cut the Future Jobs Fund, which was exceptionally important to so many young people. Jobs Growth Wales was created in part as a response to the cut that was made. And I have to say, I don't see that there is in Whitehall an equivalent scheme that is anything like as successful in offering opportunities to young people. It's a scheme that we are very proud of and the people of Wales are very proud of.
Jeff Cuthbert.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, Jobs Growth Wales has been particularly successful within the Cyflwynir borough, creating over 1,000 jobs, with 90% of them filled, and it's the most successful area in the whole of Wales. Will you agree with me, First Minister, in congratulating the Labour-controlled Cyflwynir County Borough Council, who have run, in collaboration with that scheme, the Passport Programme, a European-funded scheme which has delivered an additional 176 work placements?
Absolutely. I would certainly offer my congratulations to Cyflwynir Council, and it's an example of, one example at least, of local government working together with us in order to provide opportunities for young people.
Question 6, Nick Ramsey. Sorry, 6, Nick Ramsey.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the availability of cancer treatment in Wales?
We're proud to have a system which patients get access to proven and effective treatments, and the fact that cancer waiting times for treatment are better than England.
Thank you. Glad it's not just me who stumbles over my words, Presiding Officer. FM, patients in England are 7 times more likely to gain access to cancer drugs than patients in Wales. The UK government spends £200 million a year on a cancer drugs fund. But here, as you know, we don't have one. There is currently a petition winging its way to the Welsh Government with tens of thousands of signatures on it calling for a cancer treatment fund here in Wales. When will your government reconsider your current position and give cancer sufferers in Wales the treatment they need and deserve?
There are cancer drugs that are available in Wales that are not available in England. Shall we see a petition then, organised by his party complaining about that? I wonder what the petition actually says, for example. Does it say that people want to see a particular fund for cancer drugs funded by taking money away from other drugs, which is the way it's been done in England? I suppose these things are not made clear to people. Of course they wouldn't be. But he doesn't have to listen to me. I mean, he has to listen to the King's Fund, who question the Cancer Drugs Fund, the British Medical Journal, which questions the Cancer Drugs Fund in terms of what it delivers. And the point that the British Medical Journal makes, and it's a point they might be interested in, is this. That in years gone by, when pharmaceutical companies went to NICE and asked for approval for a drug and they were refused, they went back to NICE and offered the drug at a lower price. Now they don't do it. They go to the Cancer Drugs Fund and are paid whatever they ask for the particular drug. So in fact, what the Cancer Drugs Fund is doing is paying pharmaceutical companies over the odds for drugs that in the past would actually have cost the NHS a lot less. So the taxpayer is paying more for drugs under the Cancer Drugs Fund than would normally be the case. It's financial ill-discipline. It's important, of course, that there is a system in place for ensuring that people have access to drugs where their circumstances dictate that, and that's why, of course, we have the IPFR process in order to do that. But simply throwing money at pharmaceutical companies, which is what the Cancer Drugs Fund does, is not the way forward for Wales.
George Watson.
First Minister, yesterday I met with the Chair of Hywel Dda Health Board to discuss cancer services at Weinidogion General Hospital. and her message was clear. Yes, there are recruitment problems, but services have not and will not be affected. Patients will receive the same specialist care that they needed before this crisis arose. Hywel Dda is working with Abertawe Bro Morgannwg Health Board to improve oncology recruitment. First Minister, can you assure me and the people of Pembrokeshire that the Welsh Government will monitor that process to appoint a full-time palliative care consultant? And can you confirm that plans for a new chemotherapy day unit at Weinidogion Hospital are progressing?
Yes, I can say that the Minister will raise the issue with the Chair of Hywel Dda, and officials will continue to monitor the appointment of a replacement consultant oncologist and palliative care consultant. And I can say to the member that the plans for the new chemotherapy day unit are not affected.
Lindsay Whittle.
Well, First Minister, what is being done then, please, to improve on the 5-year lung cancer survival rates in Wales, which is, apart from Bulgaria, the worst survival rate in the whole of Europe?
Lung cancer is a particularly difficult disease to treat. We know, for example, in some areas of cancer, we are world leaders in terms of survival rates. Much of it depends on the underlying health of the individual. Much of it depends, of course, on GPs referring early, which I believe they are doing now. Certainly much more referral by GPs of suspected cancers. Fortunately for most people, it turns out that it isn't cancer. But nevertheless, with lung cancer, early diagnosis is absolutely key. And I know the GPs are very keen, and we have encouraged them to refer early in order to give people a better chance, at least, of survival beyond 1 year and hopefully survival beyond 5.
Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, surface radiotherapy and peritoneal metastases cytoreduction are clinically proven radiotherapy and surgical techniques that we have the clinicians in Wales who could carry out those particular interventions. Yet, to date, the government has decided not to offer those treatments here in Wales. In June, I asked you this question. You said you would get the Health Minister to reply to me. I'm still waiting for that response. Could you give a definitive answer here today about the Welsh Government's commitment to provide surface radiotherapy and peritoneal cytoreduction for Welsh patients in Welsh hospitals?
I will, well, if a response has not been received, I will rectify that. The Minister has heard today, and I will make sure the response is provided as soon as possible.
Question 7, Janet Finn-Saunders.
Officer, will the First Minister make a statement on the rollout of broadband provision in North Wales?
Yes, good progress is being made with the rollout of superfast broadband. Some exchanges have already been enabled with fast fibre broadband, and other exchanges are planned for a rollout later this year and early next year.
Thank you. But as regards the superfast broadband rollout and the significant investment therein, constituents, and many constituents, are requesting more information that is currently available as to how, where and when they're going to be able to receive the service. Although more properties now access superfast broadband, take-up in Wales is percentage-wise lower than in England. And it appears that little has been done as regards the marketing and exploitation of the services forthcoming and available now. And BT maintained they've had no funding whatsoever for this. What steps is your government taking to ensure awareness is raised regarding the availability of this service across Wales? And have you set a budget aside to do this?
It's surely within BT's interest to do that themselves.
They're not allowed to spend it on that.
I must say, they are, of course, our partners in terms of the rollout. Nearly 234,000 premises across Wales have now been given access to fast fibre broadband. I'm not surprised that people are not using fast fibre broadband as they should, probably because they haven't got access to it yet. I'm sure that will change as a result of Superfast Cymru. And let's remember that the market would never have delivered this. This is a Welsh Government initiative ensuring that many premises and settlements across Wales are getting access to superfast broadband in a way that would not otherwise be possible. This is an investment in Wales's infrastructure and one that we are proud of.
Rhynaf Iorwerth.
Diolch. Llywydd yn ôl adroddiad diweddar gan Cyngor ar bopeth yn Ynys Môn, mae'r ganran ucha o bobl sydd ddim wedi defnyddio y we o gwbl. Mae'r ffigwr hwnnw ar bron i 30%. A tra dwi wrth gwrs yn edrych ymlaen at weld cyswllt y gwe cyflym ar draws Cymru i gyd. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno bod angen blaenoriaethu ardaloedd fel Ynys Môn a sicrhau bod gan bawb fynediad at y we, achos wrth gwrs y difreintiedig yn aml iawn sydd ar eu colled fwyaf o fethu gallu mynd ar-lein.
Anodd iawn wrth gwrs i ddweud na, mae yna bob aelod yn y lle bron bob byddwn ni'n gweud a byddwn ni'n gweud bod taw i ardal nhw dyle cael blaenoriaeth. Beth sy'n bwysig yw bod hwn yn digwydd ac yn digwydd yn gyflym i sicrhau wrth gwrs bod bobl yn Ynys Môn yn gallu cael mynediad i'r band eang. Gai ddweud ynglyn â unigolion, bydd na fanylion ar gael i nhw, a hefyd bydd nhw'n cael manylion ynglyn â os mae grant ar gael iddyn nhw wrth gwrs, neu a dylen nhw i sefyll i'r fibers i ddod iddi ardaloedd nhw. Ond mae'n ei gofio mewn blwyddyn a hanner, byddwn ni mewn sefyllfa lle bydd canran uchel iawn dros 90% o bobl Cymru a mynediad i'r band eang. Bydd hwnna byth wedi digwydd sy'r farchnad wedi wneud hwn i hunan.
Question 8, Claire Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar ysbytau cymunedol yng Ngogledd Cymru?
Wel, ni'n disgwyl wrth gwrs i bawb ledled Cymru gael yr un cyfle i dderbyn gofal o'r ansawdd uchaf sydd wedi ddilynio i ddiwallu anghenion unigolion a hynny cyn agosed a sy'n posibl i'w cartref.
Diolch am eich ateb. Mi fyddwch chi'n gwybod dwi'n siŵr ddydd Iau, mi fydd trigolion tref y Fflint yn pleidleisio mewn referendwm lleol dros neu yn erbyn gael ysbyty cymunedol. Gofiwch chi hefyd dwi'n siŵr i'r ysbyty yno gai rhyw 19 mis yn ôl a bod hwnnw wedi profi fod yn amlblogaidd iawn yn lleol ac yn ôl nifer o drigolion lleol wedi arwen at ddirywiad mewn gwasanaeth lleol. Gai ofyn i chi, Prif Weinidog, i barchu canlyniad y referendwm, ac os bydd na bleidlais o blaid ysbyty, byddwch chi yn annog y Bwrdd Iechyd lleol i ystyried y penderfyniad o ddifri?
Gallwn ni ddim ail agor hwn. Gai ddweud bod y penderfyniad i hunan ddim wedi cael ei roi i Weinidogion Cymru gan y cymuned iechyd cymunedol, felly does na ddim rôl nawr i Weinidogion Cymru. I dewis nhw oedd hwnna. Gai ddweud un peth hefyd, fi'n deall wrth gwrs bod bobl yn wastad yn ffenomenal dros ben pan maen nhw'n gweld rhywbeth yn cael lle maen nhw'n gyfarwydd o hwnna dros y blynydde, wedi gweld e'n fwy etholaeth i. Ond beth sy'n digwydd yw, unwaith maen nhw'n gweld yr adnoddau newydd sydd ar gael, does neb moyn mynd nôl i'r hen system. So beth byddwn ni'n gweud i'r trigolion y Fflint yw hwn. Fi'n gwybod bod yna gynlluniau neu sicrhau bod yna adnoddau newydd sbon i bobl Fflint, adnoddau bydd yn galluogi bobl i aros yn y tŷ a cael gofal yn y tŷ yn lle mewn i ysbyty. A felly byddwn ni'n gweud, wel, mae rhaid ystyried beth arall bydd ar gael. Mae profiad yn dangos lle mae yna rhywbeth newydd ar gael. Mae Llanfair y Miallt yn enghraifft o hwn, lle oedd yna ymgyrch cadarn yn erbyn cair ysbyty lleol. Nawr, wrth gwrs, mae yna ganolfan hollol newydd, ganolfan iechyd sydd yn boblogaidd yn y gymuned. Beth fyddwn ni'n gweud i roi cyfle i'r cynlluniau sydd mynd i gael i symud mlaen yn yr ardal. Ond ynglyn â beth allif Weinidogion Cymru i wneud, wel, mae'r system wedi cael, cyngor iechyd cymunedol ddim wrth gwrs wedi roi hwn i Weinidogion Cymru i ail ystyried.
Andrew Sandbach.
Well, First Minister, the figures that your government published last week highlighted the problem of bed blocking in the Welsh NHS, and of course that's a direct consequence as a result of the closure of community hospitals. The Welsh average saw 63% of patients waiting to leave hospital delayed by 3 weeks. When we're seeing delays like this and getting people out of hospital, and particularly out into community hospitals so that they are not causing problems in the district general hospitals, surely you should pay attention to referendums like that happening in relation to the Flint Community Hospital. Otherwise, how do you plan to deal with those delayed releases of care?
First of all, the member gives the impression that delayed transfers of care have increased. They have not increased. They've gone down in reality. In fact, the number of delays in July of this year is 10% lower than the figure in August of last year. So her entire argument goes flying out the window as soon as... So the premise of her argument is already destroyed. I don't want people to be discharged from general hospitals into other hospitals. I want people to go home. That's the whole point. And I want to make sure that there are opportunities for people to get the enhanced care that they need so that they can go home, not sit in hospitals for weeks upon weeks, rather than go home. And I don't accept her premise that what we should do is to move people out of a DGH and into a community hospital and forget about them. I'm not prepared to do that. I know the Minister is not prepared to do that either. I want to see people back at home, and we need to see modern facilities in communities across Wales that enable people to go home as quickly as possible. And that is exactly what we will do as a government, and we have demonstrated that across the whole of Wales.
Alan Roberts.
First Minister, I think the problem you have is a lack of trust as far as North Wales residents are concerned, because time after time those new facilities have not been opened. We've lost 50 community beds over the last 18 months. We've also lost 370 beds during the last 4 years from our district general hospitals. So the real issue is, not only are we faced with no new facilities being opened to replace the beds that have been taken out of the system, but also a situation where care provision within the sector is also being blocked by local authorities due to the cuts in local authority social services budgets.
Well, can I say in relation to Flint, it's been raised. There are proposals, of course, for a joint health and housing scheme, a new primary care resource centre in the town, which will provide an integrated health centre with extra care provision. I cannot see why people would be against that. And I give an example in my own constituency of a care home that closed in Kenfig Hill. People were up in arms about it. It was an elderly building. People were sharing rooms, sharing bathrooms, but people were very attached to the building. We accepted that. Now, there's an extra care facility there, and nobody wants to go back to the old system. So the point I would make is that where you have new facilities, new integrated facilities, Bilthwell is the example that I gave. I went then opened it. People who are very much against a change in provision, when they see the new provision and the new resources, will often change their mind. And my message would be to people, I understand that people are very attached to hospitals, particularly hospitals that have been there for many, many years, but there comes a time when we have to move to a system which is better for patients and enables more people to be looked after at home, which I'm sure is what we all want to see.
Question 9, Roger Glyn Thomas.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar ddiwygio Llywodraeth leol?
Wel, nath wrth gwrs y Gweinidog datganiad ar hwn wrthnos diwethaf.
Dwi'n siŵr y byddai'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno gyda fi os ni'n mynd i gael datrysiad cynaladwy i sut i ddarparu gwasanaethau cyhoeddus yng Nghymru, bod rhaid edrych ar y gwasanaethau cyhoeddus yn ei cyfanrwydd. Pan felly nathoch chi atal Comisiwn Williams rhag edrych ar y gwasanaeth iechyd a gwasanaethau cyhoeddus eraill yng Nghymru yn yr adroddiad a baratoedd ar eich cyfer chi fel Llywodraeth?
Wir, beth wedys i wrth Comisiwn Williams oedd ni ddim moyn ail ystyried ffiniau'r byrdde iechyd o achos y ffaith bod nhw wedi cael ei ail ystyried yn weddol o ddiweddar. A dim ail edrych ar yr un peth to, cwbl o flynyddoedd ar ôl wneud tro diwetha. Popeth arall, oedd yna gyfle wrth gwrs i Comisiwn Williams i ystyried, a mae rhaid i gofio bod Comisiwn Williams i hunan yn ystyried pob math o pob ran o'r sector gyhoeddus yn ei dim ond Llywodraeth leol, ta'n wrth gwrs mae'r bwyslais wedi bod.
Jonathan Saunders.
Presiding Officer. Following the Williams recommendations, we are now seeing some authorities taking forward the initiative to look at the prospect of merging with their neighbouring authority. But all this, of course, takes time and will have serious implications in terms of our already stretched resources, signalling much change and doubt for many elected members, but more importantly our staff. What dialogue has taken place between the Welsh Government and your officials with the authorities already mentioned, and how have you factored in the actual cost of reorganisation to the authorities as well as the cost to the Welsh Government for any financial incentives promised?
Well, the Minister met, I believe, with WLGA leaders last Friday. The prospectus inviting local authorities to submit proposals for voluntary mergers has been issued, and expressions of interest are requested by the 28th of November. That prospectus contains a clear commitment to support local authorities which take part in early mergers.
Peter Black.
Thank you, President. First Minister, when your Minister made the statement last week, he outlined a process by which voluntary mergers could take place, which included a proper business case being put forward and also transitional funding to assist those local authorities. When you come to do the mandatory mergers for legislation, will they also have transitionary funding, and will a business case also have to be put together for those mergers?
Well, I mean, it takes us beyond the election, so it's a matter for parties to put in their manifestos. But certainly there are... It is the case that many local authorities will look to, or some local authorities will look to merge, particularly, of course, with regard to certainty for their staff, and it's important that those that wish to merge according to an agreed map and with ministerial approval are able to do so. But of course, my party will put forward proposals in the 2016 election. I'm sure his party, I think STV, I believe, will probably be in the manifesto that his party will put forward. I've not seen it yet, but I can guarantee that it will be in there. And of course, there will be a need to put these matters to the people of Wales, and of course, a way forward found after 2016.
Question 10, Paul Davies.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar gyfleusterau trafnidiaeth yng Ngorllewin Cymru?
Mae sicrhau bod cyfleusterau digonol yn cael ei darparu yn rhan allweddol o unrhyw system drafnidiaeth.
Prif Weinidog, dwi wedi derbyn sylwadau ynghylch yr angen difrifol am orsaf drenau Aberdegleddau gael ei hiwchraddio, a dwi'n gwerthfawrogi bod hyn ddim yn fater uniongyrchol i Lywodraeth Cymru. Ar ôl dweud hynny, o styried yr amgylchiadau, allwch chi ddweud wrthyn ni pa drafodaethau yma'ch Llywodraeth chi wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig a network rail ynghylch uwchraddio gorsafoedd tren yng Nghymru, a byddwch chi hefyd yn fodlon ymrwymo eich Llywodraeth chi godi'n benodol, wrth gwrs, orsaf tren Aberdegleddau ac yn wir orsafoedd tren yn gyffredinol yn eich trafodaethau yn y dyfodol.
Hwn yn bwyd pwysig, achos yn un ar Llywodraeth, beth gyntaf ni'n gweld yw sicrhau bod y sefyllfa ynglyn â'r reilffyrdd yn cael ei ddatrys ynglyn â'r trydyneiddio. Dwi'n ddim yn effeithio Aberdegleddau yn uniongyrchol, fi'n deall hynny. Ond wrth wneud hynny, barn ni fel Llywodraeth yw y dylai cyllideb reilffyrdd cael ei ddatganoli. Wedyn, wrth gwrs, bydde fe'n bosib i ystyried gorsaf Aberdegleddau a rei eraill hefyd mwyn sicrhau bod nhw'n cael ei uwchraddio. Ynglyn â gwasanaethau, wrth gwrs, mae rhaid wrth gwrs i ail ystyried y franchise, diwyn ddim yn rhywbeth sy'n uniongyrchol o dan reolaeth Llywodraeth Cymru, ond mae yna gyfle yna i sicrhau bod reolaeth yn dod fan hyn, mwyn sicrhau bod na fuddsoddiad yn cael ei roi mewn i orsafoedd fel Aberdegleddau sydd eisiau fe.
Question 11, Gwenda Thomas.
Am wnaeth y Prif Weinidog roi diweddariad ar y datganiad polisi iaith fyw, iaith byw, symud ymlaen.
Diolch. Ers cyflwyno bwrw ymlaen yn yr Eisteddfod, ni eisiau wedi agor cronfa bwrw ymlaen gwerth 300,000 eleni a chronfa cyfalaf o 1.25 miliwn. Yn ogystal wrth gwrs mae ymgyrch farchnata pethau bychain wedi cydio dychymyg ac mae'r ymateb hyd yma wedi bod yn gadarnhaol.
Diolch am eich ymateb, Prif Weinidog. Yn eich datganiad ar y 6 o Awst y flwyddyn yma, cyhoeddasoch cronfa 400,000 i gefnogi'r cysylltiad rhwng yr economi a'r iaith Gymraeg. Yn fetholaeth i Castell Nedd, mae manteision amlwg o gysylltu'r iaith Gymraeg, dwyieithrwydd a'r economi. Sut byddwch yn codi ymwybyddiaeth ymhlith y gymuned fusnes yn fetholaeth o ran argaeledd y gronfa hon? A wnewch chi, neu ydych chi wedi cyhoeddi manylion mynediad i'r gronfa ar gyfer fetholaeth?
Wel, mae rhan o'r 400,000 gath i ddatgan yn cael ei anelu at marchnata a hefyd hybu'r iaith Gymraeg. Mae yna gefnogaeth ar gael hefyd o Busnes Cymru, sydd yn rhoi gwasanaeth dwyieithog i busnesau dros Gymru'n gyfan gwbl. Ac wrth gwrs bydd yna ran i rhanbarthau dinasol, city regions, mwyn sicrhau bod yna wybodaeth ar gael i busnesau ym mhob ran o Gymru, yn wedig etholaeth eich etholaeth chi yng Nghastell Nedd, mwyn sicrhau bod busnesau ymwybodol o'r gefnogaeth sydd ar gael.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2, which